I'm Ellen Brown, President of the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. We're part of an international community and humanitarian service organization comprised of 1.4 million members in over 44,000 clubs in more than 200 countries. Rotary leads the world in volunteer service. For more than 112 years, the Rotary Club of Harrisburg has organized impactful local service projects that changes lives and creates hope where it's needed most. Please join us at a Rotary luncheon at the Hilton, service on a Monday, or a Rotary alternate meeting to meet our members who are waiting to welcome you. You can find out more about us at hbgrotary.org. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope to welcome you as a member soon.
It's my great honor through my role both here at Rotary Club and as a member of the Board of Advisors for Penn State Harrisburg to introduce today Dr. Wanda Knight, Assistant Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Penn State Harrisburg, the first person to hold that position at Penn State Harrisburg, a long career in teaching. Levels pre-K through 12. I said the behavior, I told Dr. Knight, might be more like the pre-K as I look at ski, but our attention level and our ability to digest information would be much closer to what she is used to every day in her role at Penn State Harrisburg. It's important to note that Dr. Knight is the first woman of color in her field to be nominated and elected by the National Art Education Association membership and to serve as president of that same association. She holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in art education from The Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio, a Master of Education's degree in educational leadership from Saginaw Valley State University in Michigan, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in art education from North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. Now give a good Rotary warm welcome to Dr. Wanda Knight.
Good afternoon. Say it like you mean it. Good afternoon. Okay, thank you. That's call and response. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here, and I really am so appreciative and honored to serve as a guest speaker here today. And I'm going to continue to say that I would love to see you all at this banquet next Monday, a week from today. Lots of people will be there, and it will be a great momentous occasion. And it looks like a person in this room will be getting 2 awards on the same day, and that's Joe Robinson, who's one of our honorees. So if nothing else, come out and give him your support. So again, the registration will be closing today. So please make sure that you have an opportunity to participate. And that is with a plated meal and entertainment and a cash bar and very outstanding meal. So anyways, again, it's an honor to be here. But when we started thinking about community, and this was one of my efforts for my office, is to do this banquet within this region, because I understood as I looked around, what could we do to bring different community members together? So I'm excited about the notion of community. And as already mentioned, I'm the inaugural, I hold an inaugural role in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Penn State Harrisburg. And my goal today is to share with you what we are doing to build an ideal community, building blocks. And I'll talk a little bit more about those building blocks. So first of all, when you think about community, most people think they have a great understanding of community. But before that, I want to talk a moment about what ideal means. And I'm intentionally using the notion of ideal. It's really satisfying one's conception of what is perfect or most suitable. What is perfect or most suitable. Whether we get there or not, but I'm still looking for that ideal. But then I think about what is community. And it's a feeling of fellowship where others do to sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. So we use the notion of community pretty freely, but when I think about community, I like to say that this quote was resonated with me. Some people think they are in community, but they are only in proximity. True community requires commitment and openness. It is a willingness to extend yourself to encounter and know the other. Encounter and know the other. I wanted to take a moment for us to reflect, and I like to share cartoons. Some of my background is in the arts and other areas, because sometimes they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So for me, I would say that also resonates very much with me. So take a look at this image. What's the matter? It's the same distance. Take a look at that. So what does that mean to you? Anybody want to share? Obstacles. There are obstacles. Some obstacles are visible and some are invisible. And we think we're running the same distance. It may be graduation, it may be some other kind of occurrence, if I speak of education, but are we aware of the obstacles? While we can't always walk in someone else's shoes, we can take the time to inquire about how the shoe fits and if this path is smooth or riddled with pebbles. And that's what happens in communities. Oftentimes we have to know who's in our community and how well they're being served. So in doing so, I want us to think about, identifying barriers. So this is what I'm hoping we'll think about is how do we identify the barriers that are within our community? Also, I'm hoping today is to think about how we might break barriers. They exist, how do we break them? And then on top of that, how do we expand pathways for access and success? We have to expand the pathways. A lot of people talk about dismantling and breaking and anti this and that, but what are we doing to build? And this is really about building community as well. So I have to talk about breaking, just like when we talk about injustice, we have to talk about justice or talk about justice and justice. So expanding these pathways for ideal communities. And what I'd like to say is that if we change the outlook, I believe we can change the outcome. Sometimes we have bleak outlooks within communities. Oh, these have always been these disparities. We've always had these difficulties within this community. But what can we do in terms of how we look out on the world? Can we change our outlook so we can change our outcome? So that's why I developed the notion of ideal. And I know there are other people that use the terminology or use this term. They may even say idea, but it is an acronym, and I call these the building blocks of an ideal community. Now, remember, the notion of ideal is something that is what we continue to strive toward, whether we get there or not. So with that, the D, I'm going to jump around a little bit here, is diversity. And notice how I'm going to think about bodies. And when I talk about diversity, I want everybody to recognize how they benefit from ideal or diversity. We all are diverse. Everybody is diverse. So if you look around, and so anybody who says I'm not all about that diversity stuff is for the other, but everybody is diverse. Everybody is different. And I use that term very broadly. I'm not going to have a sense of identity loss. This keeps getting stuck in different places that I don't care about. So the term diversity describes both observable and non-observable individual differences. They could be life experiences, work context, learning and working styles, personality types, among others, and group social differences. It could be racial, ethnic, gender, identity, expression, age, social class, country of origin, disability, ability, beliefs, intellectual and cultural, and I can just go on and on. That's how different we are. That contribute to a vibrant professional teaching and learning community. And that's why ideal is so important. And if you're talking about a vibrant community as in a social context beyond an academic environment, then that would hold true as well. Think about yourself for a moment. Everybody is different. No two people have fingerprints that are the same, even identical twins. No two people are the same. So what about people are wanting to be like somebody else? And being in the arts, if you are that unique, you are an original. And originals are more valuable than copies. So we don't need to copy. We don't need to be like anybody else. Be you, be yourself, be beautiful. So again, think about who you are and what differences you bring and embrace those differences. Some of those observable and some are not observable. So everybody is different. Equity, that's the E, one of the building blocks. Everybody wants to be treated fairly. Now, one thing that I've noticed, some people conflate the terms equality and equity. Well, number one, equality is sameness. Equity is fairness. Everybody wants to be treated fairly. And this refers to conditions that support fairness and justice based on individual needs and circumstances where all individuals have opportunities to thrive and realize their best. So if you go back to that imagery that I shared with you at the beginning, and you see people running a race, sometimes when people come to us or communities will say, this is what their needs are we listening? And I say that because some people will say, well, if I do that for this group, I got to do it for them too. Well, all needs are not the same. That's why we have difference. All needs are not the same. So we have to give people what they need to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive. So in running a race, what if equality meant I gave everybody a size 7.5 pair of shoes? Because that's a fair thing to do. And guess what? Some people will run that race very well because size 7.5 is their shoe size. But what about those that have, some of you probably got a size 13 in this room, I'm just guessing. But what if you got a size 7.5 pair of shoes? You wouldn't run that race. And guess what? If I look at you and look at it from a deficit perspective and say, what's wrong with you? Everybody else is running well. Why aren't you? The shoes don't fit. So think about equality and equity, but we give people what they need. So if a person needs a particular pair of shoes, then we give them that so they can survive and thrive. So also inclusion. I hear these terms banter around quite a bit. So everybody wants to be recognized for their uniqueness. We don't need to hide because some part of us is unique. So everybody wants to be unique. They want to be recognized. And this describes proactive, intentional, and thoughtful engagement with diversity to the extent that all can contribute fully and effectively. So inclusion, also start thinking about access. Access. Everybody should have equal opportunities. Now here I'm talking about equal opportunities to utilize the same products and services as others. Everybody should be able to use the same products and services as others. And I focus here on disabilities. Disabilities. The term access refers to reduction or elimination of physical and attitudinal. Notice I said attitudinal. Sometimes they come with attitudinal barriers, what we think and how that impacts the outcome. Sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy to equitable opportunities in the provision of accommodations and modifications to ensure equal opportunity for people in general, but specifically people with disabilities. And some of us, again, disabilities can be seen and not seen. And then when I think about belonging, so you might say, why did the L come from an ideal? Because it's about longing. It's about longing. Everybody longs to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and to be understood. And I can just keep adding different dots, and talking about belonging. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We belong. We need to belong. And when you think people don't belong, they don't thrive. So belonging describes a perception or sense of connectedness. And that's what community is about, connectedness with others that makes one feel part of a community. But it takes a village. And that's what I'm seeing in this room and what I believe you are about. Operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, access, and belonging will not be an instantaneous process. It will take a coalition of the willing to tackle problems that have persisted for decades. One person, and I speak of that, I say that all the time on my campus. One person alone should not be responsible for dismantling institutional barriers and implementing ideal practices. All of us must work together to make this work sustainable and scalable. And guess what? Everybody benefits from diversity. It's not just certain individuals. Teamwork makes the dream work. You've heard that before. It takes a team. Teamwork is what makes the dream work. So I'd like to share with you one area to make the work scalable and sustainable is I've developed and put together an ideal board of advisors. So when you start saying the word ideal, after a while psychologically, we start to get into a certain way of thinking. And this is an externally facing group that is comprised of prominent Harrisburg area civic, business, education, and government leaders who hold positions of power and influence in the central region, especially regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice initiatives across Pennsylvania. Right now, I have at least 2 people in this room who right now serve on this ideal board of advisors, this ideal committee. And they are Ryan Unger and Joe Robinson as well. So thank you for your service. So in putting this together, and again, this is an inaugural work, so we're moving about systematically and strategically, again, because it's about sustainability. It's not checking a box and saying we're done or we've met that criteria. This is much more about also putting together a leadership council. So I put together a leadership council, an ideal leadership council. And this is an internal group of campus-wide diversity leaders representing students. We have other committees like Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee, DEC, the Committee on Racial and Ethnic Diversity, the School of Business, School of Public Affairs, Behavioral Sciences and Education, Humanities, the library, and other areas. So this is our internal facing group. And together, you can see how they overlap in doing this work toward helping us meet our vision, mission, and goals. So that's what's really critical for us. So the mission and goals. So this Board of Advisors Committee is ideal for these reasons, because now we're looking at what expectations of them. So here's a mission statement, and I'm not going to read all of these terms, but because I want to give you an opportunity to ask me questions. But this is worth saying that the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Access, and Belonging Committee and Council support the college in its efforts to build a supportive community that empowers students to fulfill their academic and professional passions on a campus that is diverse, welcoming, and inclusive for all students, faculty, staff, and community members. Moreover, the committee is tasked with pursuing equity and social justice through the distribution or the redistribution of opportunities, privileges, resources, and the cultivation of positive experiences for underrepresented and historically underserved groups, so everyone has what they need to thrive and reach their full potential. So we are clear on what our mission is, and as we move forward, so I gave them examples of activities for engagement. Again, I'm always interested in strategic planning. Some people are not excited about strategic planning, but I do that, and I do it. I've been doing it for years with different companies and across the United States and Fortune 500 companies. So it's important for us to have strategies and be strategic in what we do. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable work. Again, recruitment and retention of faculty, staff, and students, recommendation for infrastructural support, outreach and engagement, other board members. So you can see there are quite a few ideal activities for engagement. Champion the impact and visibility of ideal initiatives. I'm all about IV. IV is an infusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. IV, that means impact. What are we doing? How are we impacting the community? Impact. And V, visibility. We tell you what we're going to do, and we're going to do it. And you'll be able to see that. And that's when we know we're making a difference also. Again, assessment, college policies. So here's the different thing when I said that no one person should be responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion in isolation of others. The same thing goes with our ideal committee. We have all of these other, I'm thinking of it as a tapestry that's interwoven. Ideal is its own standalone committee, but by the same token, other committee members are a part of ideal. So therefore, it's not, well, that's the ideal of the diversity group that's working on it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion and access in all of those areas are interwoven throughout all areas of what we do, and that is the goal. No, we're not there yet, but we're on our way. And expectations for meetings, I've given their bylaws. I mean, we went through all of these processes with Penn State to put this in place. And this leadership council works toward a vision. That's the Wanda vision, or the night vision. I think some of you got that food on your stomach. So anyways, and my goal is to positively impact the human experience. And we all have experiences, a human experience. And I want to do that on a campus free of racism, prejudice, and discrimination, again, where people representing all identities. We have identities. You know, whether we make them known or not, diverse perspectives and life experiences benefit from a welcoming environment. And again, where these steadfast values reflect the mission and vision of the campus. So, and that's why it's so important to have people working toward diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging mission. And that helps us expand pathways for access and success. And I have 3 strategic priorities that I'm working on this upcoming year. And we're establishing the foundational structure, which I've just shared with you. I haven't fully socialized that just yet, but there's a full strategic plan that we're about to roll out related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then now look at how it's integrated into the overall strategic plan. So again, to cultivate and maintain this diverse, equitable, and inclusion community in, at Penn State Harrisburg, I want to eliminate equity gaps and disparities among students. So how do we do that? But first we have to identify where they are, and there are strategies for doing that. And then our 3rd strategic priority is to ensure that the institutional culture aligns with the principles and practices of teaching and learning that prioritize equity, accessibility, and inclusivity. So really what I'm asking you to do is to remember. Now, I'm always talking, like to talk positive, just so you know. I rarely will say anything negative intentionally, and if I do, I catch myself. Some people say, don't forget. Well, that's negative. So I tell people to remember, because we tell people we don't want, and that's what a lot of diversity is, what we don't want. What do we want? And that's when you start to prioritize. So I tell people to remember. I remember as a principal of schools, when the teachers would tell the student, don't run in the hallway. And then a kid got down and started crawling. And then I brought the child to my office and said, he needs to go home because he's being a wise student. And I said, why? Because I told him to stop running in the hallway. I mean, don't run in the hallway. And I said, okay, then what do you want him to do? Well, I want him to walk. So we can just simply say walk. And that's not negative, but it tells you what you want and what you don't want. So if crawling would have been inappropriate, if you had said walk, but when you say don't run in that hallway and you crawl, well, I stopped running. So I'm just saying that. So what are we saying? So I want you to remember, okay, that everybody benefits from diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And you can see how these things overlap. Everybody. So when people start to tell you, oh, that's for other people, or we think it doesn't matter for us, it does matter. It's really critical as well. So I wanted to fly through that pretty quickly, because I do want you to, you know, ask me some questions and hear from you, get some feedback, and still get you out of here on time. Thank you so much. Yes.
We talk about equity, we talk about all different aspects of things, of areas. But I'm just curious to see, with current news going on and October 7th and the whole religious freedom now thing, how's that been impacting not only the ideal, but also maybe Penn State, the campus, and because that's the big talk now, what's going on campuses regarding free speech and things like that.
I think what's interesting, thank you for saying that, and I encourage free speech. So what I have developed are fireside chats. I do 3 of those per year, and they happen in October, December, and February. And I take the hottest topic of the day. For example, I did one on, and anybody can come, and right now there's a proliferation of interests. I did one that when we did affirmative action, that was the topic, hot topic. When there were women reproductive rights, hot topic. Critical race theory, hot topic. So, and I just did the Palestinian and Israeli situation. And people were so stressed out and freaked out that that was going to be something that was going to make the news. But when you facilitate conversations and you're not looking for polarizing debates, but you're looking for healthy conversations that affirm, then oftentimes people just want to be heard. They want to feel like they belong. And that's when I saw we had a great time. And police officers were like, well, we had nothing to do. I said, I knew you wouldn't have anything to do, because the goal would be to have people being heard. And when we silence people and we do not affirm them, then that's when we get more of the same. It's been my experience, and I've been doing this for many years. So I would say that the freedom of speech, so that's the conundrum. When we say inclusion, inclusion is not just the voices that we want to hear. when we say inclusion, true inclusion means everybody needs to be heard. We don't have to agree with them. We don't even have to like them, but we can respect their perspectives. And when you call people in, rather than calling them out, hey, help me understand your perspective, then we start to get people explaining to us, and we start to understand, and that's where your conversations and sometimes healthy dialogues can come into play. So versus, I don't want to hear you, you're one of those, so we come with these exaggerated stereotypes sometimes, but that conversation, that civil conversation can move us much more toward these ideals than not. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, there's a mic. That's right. Okay. Hi, I don't really need a mic, but I guess I do for the people on the Zoom. Sorry. So thank you for your presentation. I really love the ideal setup. I think it's hopefully forwards the work that is being done in this space. There's so many different configurations of these things. It's hard to keep up sometimes, right? But my question is, I often get pretty exasperated about conversations, to be very, very transparent, because I feel that a lot of the time we have conversations, especially in central Pennsylvania, and when we leave the room, everything dies in that room. And when we leave out of the room, the context that exists outside of those conversations still exist. So from your expertise, since you've been doing this so long and you're bringing this kind of fresh perspective to the region, how do we move beyond these conversations, and not just beyond the conversation, but I'm a community organizer by training. So how do we organize communities past the conversation into action that actually puts ideal, right? I love ideal, but I want the ideal to be a practical ideal, an ideal that we can put into praxis in our communities around this area. I know there's not one answer to this, but I would love to have a conversation about how we get there.
Thank you so much. And I think that's so outstanding. And I think we are very much aligned, because conversations are just that. And after, just like the banquet that we'll have next week, when it's not just a good meal, but there are strategies. And even this year we have ratcheted it up, and I can't tell you, got to come and find out in terms of how we can bring this further to the community. Conversations to me are conscious raising, because when people don't have a consciousness of what's happening, or they turn to so-called, and this is pejorative, ableist language, and I apologize, a blind eye to things, then they don't know. So how do they organize? Much of my work and my writings and the publications that I have, in the last book was on social justice activism and how to do that work in the communities, and what they look like in the classroom and the communities and beyond. But part of that is having a historical context and understanding and a passion for doing the work, so that it doesn't die, and it has to be something that's sustainable. And that's why I was mentioning without, and I'm happy to even talk further and build upon it, but it has to be scaffold. So I look at accepting people where they start. People are not all ready to jump in and do certain kinds of work. They may need to know and understand some of the national work. Ryan mentioned that I'm president of our national association. It's about 92% white people, and for the first time in history, I am the first woman of color. But we now have a national diversity, equity, and inclusion model that is modeled after the work that I've done, and how they have become involved. And every state now has a state liaison officer. We have certain things that we're doing among those. That's part of the organizing. So right now, every state has a liaison. There are regional meetings, and now we have we've built a hub, a repository of work where people are starting to work, and they can enter it wherever they need to enter, so that they can lead the work that they're doing in their communities. And then there's the levels of accountability, and it's strategic. And how do you now, who's accountable? Sometimes people not accountable, and we hold people accountable. They come back and they report on what they're doing and how they're doing it and what the outcome is. And that's why I said IV, impact. Talking is not just impact. You got to do the work, and then it's got to be visible, because if not, people don't believe you're doing it. They don't know. They don't see a difference. And that's what something is that you're doing, it's making a difference. And that's really the goal. So talk can be cheap. You've heard that term, but talking is a first step for some people that haven't heard and are oblivious to many of these kinds of conditions that are happening right in their own neighborhoods. Social justice, art education, power, privilege, and politics. You're more than welcome. And I've got something called lobby activism also. So absolutely, because all these are about social justice, getting on the ground, doing the work. And I have a chapter 2 that might be useful and one that looks at the historical context. My pleasure. Other comments and questions? So right here.
Thank you, Dr. Knight, for being in Harrisburg. So, the word conversation means to change together. With your background in early education, what are some best practices? United Way and TFEC did a survey here. One of the top 4 needs in the area are kindergarten readiness. So wondered what your thoughts on advancing that in our area.
Well, thank you. For me, kindergarten readiness, and yeah, and when I was a principal of, was a K-5 school, and I did middle school level, and we were looking at what do the parents and communities need to help students be ready for school. And that was how, well, I can give you so many, oh gosh. Let me give you one example. Like, and I was a principal of an inaugural school also. I've done quite a few inaugural positions. I keep getting called to do those things for some reason. But one of those schools was an inaugural school, and it was directly in a community where it was very needy individuals, very need-based school. So actually, I worked within the community, got people coming together, set up places in schools. We brought people to school to help parents learn to read, to help their youth. And help them study, help them work together. When they did not have supplies, if they attended so many workshops, then they got the supplies that their kids needed to do the work. I brought books to the community. We brought different individuals. We talked about what they need, not what we thought they need. We asked them what did they believe they needed. And that was important to involve them in, you just said conversation. We do this together. We involve them in the conversation rather than saying, this is what you need. We say, what do you need? And we're open to listen. And even if they say they don't, then we start to, it's collaborative. Anytime you work with people and you want change, they should be a part of the conversation. And oftentimes, sometimes we think we know better that what people's kids need than they do. They may not be able to, in some instances, articulate it as well as we can, or they may not be in a position to provide the resources that are needed. But by the same token, I believe most people want the best for their children. And so when we start to be open to that conversation, and yes, it does take a little longer than quickly throwing something together and then saying it doesn't work, it didn't work, and we tried this and we tried that, and see now, no, then try the next thing. And I feel like for me, I'm constantly looking for solving problems and solutions together. It's not in isolation. No matter how we are and what we do, we have to do this together. That's why I said this work, it takes a village. Teamwork makes the dream work. So what is our dream? What do we want as the outcome? And once we decide that collectively, let's get to that work and work together to make that outcome and bring it to fruition. So I should better stop because I know this is all the time I'm beyond. Thank you so much.